less than a year. Last week, her main coalition partner quit. Critics accuse her of insulting the army during a leaked call with a former Cambodian leader. In the Philippines, Vice President Sara Duterte responds to her impeachment trial summons, demands that the case against her be dropped. Duterte was impeached in February. She is accused of corruption and an alleged assassination plot against President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Voters in Tokyo punish Japan's ruling party, which has lost its position as the largest group in the city assembly. This is a warning sign for the Prime Minister before elections are held in July. It's a record low result in the key local polls for the Liberal Democratic Party. They have led Japan almost continuously since 1955. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in London. He meets British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and King Charles. As the Ukraine war drags on, Zelensky is trying to shore up support. He is also expected to attend a NATO summit at The Hague later this week. It's been nearly 48 hours since the US struck Iran. 48 hours of tension, 48 hours of fear, 48 hours of one question: what happens next? And right now, peace feels like a distant memory in West Asia. The region is a powder keg, and it's only getting hotter. What began as a nighttime strike has now turned into daylight warfare. 20 Israeli fighter jets struck Iran. Israel calls it intelligence-based strikes. Now, they were across Tehran, Kermanshah and Hamedan. The IDF claims that it struck missile sites in western Iran and 6 Iranian airports. It destroyed around 15 fighter jets. This includes F-14, F-5 and AH-1 jets. It also damaged runways and underground bunkers. Israel also hit the Fordow nuclear facility. This is one of the sites that the US struck on Saturday night. Fordow is one of Iran's most important nuclear locations. It is buried deep inside a mountain. Israel has now targeted it again. This time it hit access routes to the nuclear facility. This comes as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel is close to achieving its goals in Iran.
When we will achieve our goals, destroying Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities, we will stop our activity beyond what is necessary to achieve them, but we will not end it too soon either. When the goals have been reached, then the operation is complete and the fighting will stop.
Israel also launched strikes at the heart of Tehran. It attacked Iran's Revolutionary Guard sites in the capital. It also struck Tehran's Evin prison, and projectiles hit the prison, damaging the facility. But the situation is under control, according to Iran. The strikes also hit the Basij militia headquarters. It's what Iran uses to suppress protests.
At this time, we continue to damage and deny the Iranian regime's ability to launch and produce missiles. At this moment, the Air Force planes are deepening the strikes in the Tehran area, with an emphasis on commanding headquarters of the Revolutionary Guards, all the elements of the threat on the State of Israel.
Meanwhile, Tehran's response came fast and in broad daylight. Missiles from Tehran rained down on Israel. It was the longest wave of attacks since the war began. Sirens wailed for over 35 minutes. Families rushed to shelters. Thousands were left without power. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime remains defiant. Iran's Supreme Leader has made his first comments since the US strikes. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei promises to punish the Zionist enemy. The Iranian military leaders have also threatened the US. They are promising a decisive response.
This is nothing new. Throughout the history of the Islamic Revolution, even before the revolution, and throughout Iran's history, we have repeatedly witnessed crimes committed by the Americans. In 1979, during the 8 years of the Sacred Offense, especially toward its final years, we witnessed their direct crimes. Each time they committed a crime, they received a decisive response, and this time will be no different.
So things are only escalating, and caught in the middle of it is West Asia and the world. Yesterday, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. Iran said Washington is destroying diplomacy, making it clear that Tehran will decide on its response.
The United States, a permanent member of this council, the depositary of the NPT, and the only state that has ever used nuclear weapons, murdering millions in 2 cities, has now once again resorted to illegal force, waged a war against my country under a fabricated and absurd pretext, preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Meanwhile, Israel claimed it was a righteous act, adding the attacks made the world a safer place.
The United States of America struck Iran's nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. The United States, the leader of the free world, removed the greatest existential threat facing the free world. Just like our Operation Rising Lion, this was not a war of choice. This action was a necessity. It was a righteous act for the United States, for Israel, for the Middle East, and for the world.
Reports say Russia, China, and Pakistan have put forward a new resolution. It calls for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. The resolution stops short of naming the US or Israel, but it clearly condemns the strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. So far, no date has been set for a vote. To pass, the resolution needs at least 9 yes votes and no vetoes from the Big Five: the US, the UK, France, Russia, and China. But with Washington on the spot, a veto is almost certain.
For 40 years, the Iranian government has called for death to America and death to Israel, and posed a constant menace to the peace and security of its neighbors, the United States, and the entire world. Iran has attacked Israel with hundreds of ballistic missiles and through terrorist proxies. For decades, Iran has been responsible for misery and countless deaths across the Middle East.
And that's where things stand tonight. The bombs have fallen, the missiles have been fired, the warnings have been made and ignored. And now the world is watching, holding its breath. Is this a one-time strike or the first chapter of a long war? Is this deterrence or escalation? Right now, there are no easy answers, only more questions. West Asia stands on the edge of something bigger, a conflict, and no one knows which way it will tip. What really happened inside Iran's nuclear sites? Were they destroyed or just damaged? Can Tehran recover from the attack? Or has the US derailed Iran's nuclear program for good? Yesterday, Trump claimed Iran's nuclear sites were obliterated by the US.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Is that what really happened? The ground reality is still coming into focus. The US struck 3 sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Satellite images have emerged today. They show for the first time the damage caused by American bombs. These pictures reveal clues about what really happened. The brunt of the bombing was focused on one site, Fordow, the one that's buried under a mountain. Fordow is around 300 feet below ground. The US used a bunker-buster bomb to reach it, the GBU-57. It is also called the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. It has been deployed for the first time ever. The bomb weighs over 13,000 kilos, so this weapon was fit for the mission. It is designed to hit targets like Fordow. The bomb can penetrate rock or concrete before blowing up deep underground. So did this weapon live up to the hype? Satellite images show 6 large craters at Fordow. They are in 2 clusters of 3 each. The US dropped 12 bombs in all there. The idea was to strike the same area multiple times and dig through the earth so that the bombs reach the nuclear site. That's some serious firepower. But experts are skeptical. There is still uncertainty about the extent of the damage. Even though Trump has claimed success, the US military has been cautious in its assessment. It says there was extreme damage, but the final assessment will take time.
I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
This uncertainty is rooted in one fact. Fordow was deeper than the bomb's design limit. The GBU-57 can travel up to 200 feet. The Fordow plant was built deeper, so it is difficult to assess if the facility is still intact.
This time, no one, including the IEA, is in a position to have fully assessed the underground damage at Fordow. Given the explosive payload utilized and the extreme vibration-sensitive nature of centrifuges, very significant damage is expected to have occurred.
What about the other 2 plants, Natanz and Isfahan? The US used submarines to hit these sites. Again, from the satellite images, it is difficult to verify the damage. We also have pictures from before the site, and they tell their own story. What was Iran doing before the bombs hit? Now, these images were clicked before Sunday. You can see trucks there. Iranian officials appear to be sealing tunnel entrances. Experts say that this was a precaution. Perhaps Iran was trying to protect its uranium supplies. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, had made an assessment. It claimed Iran has over 400 kilograms of uranium. This uranium is 60% enriched. Now that's enough material for 10 nuclear bombs. This uranium is stored in small containers. It can be moved easily and quickly, even in cars. And that's what seems to have happened. Iran claimed yesterday that it had moved the uranium out before the Americans attacked. Experts also say that Iran may have thousands of centrifuges, and they were never installed. It is possible that they were stored elsewhere, inside other facilities. Now, once they are in place, Iran could continue enriching uranium from 60% to 90%, and that's what they need for a nuclear bomb. But even then, building a weapon requires more steps. The uranium must be weaponized, and that process takes time, expertise, and more equipment. Tehran is confident the nuclear program can bounce back.
They should know that this industry is deeply rooted in our country, and they cannot eliminate a national industry like this. Of course, they have inflicted damage on us. This isn't the first time the industry has been targeted. There have been similar incidents in the past, and we immediately repaired the damage. Given the capabilities and capacities we possess, this industry must naturally continue and grow. It will not be stopped.
So what's the final verdict? The strike may have damaged Iran's nuclear infrastructure. It may have delayed or derailed some of Tehran's progress, but no total obliteration yet. For now, Iran still possesses nuclear capabilities, and as long as the know-how exists, Iran can bring its nuclear program back on track. So Trump has pulled the trigger. The question is, what's the end game? Does the US want to topple the regime in Tehran? Do they want to disable their missiles? Or is it something different? First, let's look at what Trump's team is saying. All of them ruled out regime change. They said the goal was to destroy the nuclear program. Listen in.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Well, first of all, we don't want to achieve regime change. We want to achieve the end of the Iranian nuclear program, John. That's America's objective, and that's what the president has set us out to do.
Their boss disagrees. That's US President Donald Trump. Let me quote his latest statement. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MAGA. Now, to give you some context, Trump's domestic movement is called MAGA, Make America Great Again. He is now calling for MEGA, which stands for Make Iran Great Again. It's an open call for regime change in Tehran. The question is, can he achieve it? We'll answer that question later on, but for now, let's look at the other possible objectives. Now, one is obviously regime change. The second is destroying Iran's nuclear program. This has not been achieved yet. Israel had damaged nuclear sites in Natanz and Isfahan, and the US hit the facility in Fordow. Trump claims Fordow was completely obliterated, but Iran says the damage is superficial. It's hard to say which version is the truth, because Fordow is located deep underground. Either way, Israel says it has set back Iran's nuclear program by 2 years. Set back, not destroyed. And that will worry Trump. He joined the war to destroy Iran's nuclear program. But delaying it may not be enough for him. So what's the solution? Now, he can either order more strikes on Iran, or he can let Israel take the lead, which brings us to the third option. Call it a win and quit. Trump allies are already calling this a massive success. If he stops now, he could appease both sides. The hawks, who want war with Iran, and the MAGA isolationists who oppose the war. Sort of like a middle ground tactic. And finally, the fourth option, use the pressure of these strikes to push Iran to the table. Basically, make Tehran give up the uranium voluntarily. But here's the problem. Trump has betrayed Iran twice. First, he distracted Iran while Israel began the strikes. Then he called for a 2-week timeout and joined the war. So, will Iranians trust the president again? As things stand, it's not clear what Trump wants. If he wants a regime change, it won't be easy. Just compare to what happened in Iraq. Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. It has twice as many people and a much stronger military. The only way a regime change can succeed is through occupation. It's unlikely that Trump will agree to that. A more likely option is to weaken the regime. Israel has talked about two main threats from Tehran. The first is the nuclear program. The second is the ballistic missile program. Iran is said to have the biggest missile stockpile in the region. If you destroy that, you can weaken the regime. You can basically defang it. Again, here's the risk. A weakened Iran could become a dangerous Iran. They may choose to abandon diplomacy. Instead, they may covertly pursue a nuclear bomb. So, I'm afraid there are no easy choices for Trump. Israel will keep pushing him to topple the regime in Tehran. So will the hawks in his own party. But it's a move that could derail his whole presidency. Once you enter a war, you are stuck there.
So that is the IAEA. Now, what kind of damage will only depend on the kind of intelligence that is gleaned. So we're going to wait for that. But they have prima facie agreed with Lieutenant Colonel, saying that, look, there has been significant damage. But the charge, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, is that the NPT, the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty regime, or the Non-Proliferation Treaty regime, is being undermined as these strikes are undermining the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Authority. How do you respond to this? They're saying this is illegal, dangerous.
I think the NPT definitely has been undermined by the Islamic Republic. They've been trying to build a nuclear weapon while they are allegedly or officially a member of the NPT. And that's a gross, very cynical violation. The Iranian regime is a violation of the NPT. They're, playing this double game of lying to the world, conducting negotiations, not in good faith, and then running and investing tremendous resources at this clandestine nuclear weapons program. That's a violation of the NPT. And frankly, that I think it's the real threat to non-proliferation.
So you're turning this on its head. You're saying it's actually Iran that has violated the terms of the NPT and made them pretty much infructuous. But many are saying that the strikes with the US are against international law, that Trump himself has not taken permission of his own Congress, which is their parliament, and that he has ridden roughshod along with Israel over all sorts of international treaty obligations. There are also some who are saying that human rights violations are happening and that you should all be tried for war crimes, etc., etc. What's your response to these very hard-hitting indictments by some people?
I think it is a perfectly legal measure by the United States and, of course, by Israel to preempt weapons of mass destruction. There was very clear intel that Israel has, that it also shared with the US, that the Iranians were sprinting towards a bomb. And as such, what Israel did was to take preemptive action and followed suit by the Americans. So I think not only was it necessary, it was legal, it was the right thing to do. And with so many other cases in history, like in 1981 in Osirak, Iraq, and 2007 in Deir ez-Zor, Syria, Israel took preemptive action against nuclear weapons programs in the hands of tyrants and Muslim dictators. At the time, the same voices that you referred to, or similar ones, were speaking about international law and legality and other technicalities. But the bottom line is that Israel prevented proliferation in the Middle East by taking unilateral preemptive action. That's what we're seeing now.
So the US has struck Iran's nuclear sites. Tehran is mulling a response. And amid all of this, there is one question doing the rounds. Where is Iran's so-called axis of resistance? The Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the Hamas in Gaza, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. They are known as Iran's proxies in the region. Since October 7th, Israeli attacks have crippled them massively, but they still remain active. So will they join Iran's strikes, or will they watch from the sidelines? Our next report tells you more.
For decades, Iran's security wasn't just about tanks and jets. It was about outsourcing. Rather than confront Israel or the US directly, Iran empowered militias and armed groups across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. Think of it like a spider's web. If you tug on one string, the whole web shakes. That's the theory. But now that Israel and the US have launched direct strikes inside Iran, you'd expect that web to come alive. So far, it hasn't. Let's start with the big one, the Hezbollah. This group used to be Iran's most powerful partner. Its missiles, its fighters, its ability to threaten northern Israel. It was the crown jewel of the resistance axis. But today, it's quiet. And not just quiet, it is deliberately quiet. When pressed for a response, Hezbollah's spokesman said, "Iran is capable of defending itself." Translation, this is not our fight. Now why would Hezbollah, of all groups, sit this out? Well, Israel basically crushed it last year. After months of airstrikes and a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, most of Hezbollah's leadership is gone. Their missile depots are flattened. Even Hezbollah's own loyalists aren't pretending they can recover anytime soon. They've been dealt a serious blow, and they know another war could finish them off. Then there's Hamas, once another proud member of Iran's network. Its fortunes changed drastically after October 7th, 2023. The brutal war in Gaza has left tens of thousands dead and its infrastructure decimated. Today, Hamas is more underground than operational. It doesn't have the strength to open a new front, much less retaliate for strikes in Iran. It's fighting to survive, not expand. Over in Iraq, Iran used to enjoy a loose coalition of Shia militias, groups like the Popular Mobilization Forces, that could strike US troops and bases if Tehran gave the signal. Some of them still talk tough. One militia leader said US bases in the region would become duck hunting grounds. But here's the thing, these groups know what happened the last time they tried something. Last year, an attack on a US base in Jordan killed American soldiers. The US responded with overwhelming force and left them badly bloodied. So now, they talk but they don't act. Because unlike slogans, missiles come with consequences. That leaves the Houthis in Yemen, the only group that's still kind of on the field. They've threatened to hit American ships in the Red Sea if the US keeps up its attacks on Iran. But even they are treading carefully. Just last month, the US and the Houthis agreed to a ceasefire after months of missile strikes. So yes, the Houthis have the capability to stir trouble. But even they seem to be waiting, watching which way the wind blows before fully committing. For years, Iran built an empire of influence on a low-cost, high-impact strategy. Its leaders have sold one story: attack us and the region will light up. But now its proxies are bruised, broken, or too scared to fight. Even more crucially, many of the top Iranian commanders who coordinated this network have been killed by Israel. So what happens next? Does Iran fight alone, risking a full-blown war with the US and Israel? Or does it rethink its playbook? Either way, Tehran may be learning the hard way. Even the strongest web collapses, when the strands no longer trust the center.
Iran's proxies are largely missing, so it seems like Tehran must fight alone. Assuming they do, what sort of weapons do they have? How will they try to hurt Israel and America? Now, this is largely an aerial war. So, as of now, the army has little role to play. Your tanks, your armored vehicles, your soldiers, none of them have joined the fighting. Instead, Iran has turned to its ballistic missiles. Experts say that they had around 3,000 of these missiles. Of course, this was before the war started. Since then, Iran has fired at least 500. Plus, Israel has destroyed multiple missile launches. Nonetheless, missiles remain Iran's most potent weapon. They are using offensive as defense, which brings us to the varieties of missiles. Now, yesterday, Iran launched the Kermanshah, the missile that is 13 meters. It is Iran's biggest missile. It weighs around 20 tons. It can carry multiple warheads up to 1,800 kilograms, and it can fly around 2,000 kilometers, meaning all of West Asia is within range. After the US strikes, Iran launched this missile at Israel. It slammed into northern Tel Aviv, and it wasn't a lone strike. In total, Iran fired some 40 ballistic missiles on Sunday. Now let's take a closer look at their arsenal. The shortest range missiles are the Shahab and the Fateh. They can cover up to 300 kilometers. The Shahab 2 has a longer range. It can reach up to 500 kilometers. And the Zulfagar, which can travel 700 kilometers. The Qiyam 1, 800 kilometers. And finally, the longest range ones, the Shahab 3, the Imad, the Ghadr, the Sejil, and the Kermanshah. Now, these can travel around 2,000 kilometers. These are the missiles that Iran could use to retaliate. But frankly, that's not the story. The story is what Iran will target. So far, they have not hit back at US targets. The Americans have some 19 military installations in West Asia, but none of them have been hit. Instead, Iran has continued launching missiles at Israel. And that's one option for Iran. Keep striking Israel. A second option is to unleash its proxies. Hezbollah and Hamas may be weak, but the Houthis of Yemen are still capable. They attacked cargo ships in the Red Sea for most of 2024. Chances are they could go back to doing that. Which brings us to the option 3. Iran could close off the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this is a waterway south of Iran. It carries up to 20% of the world's oil. If Iran closes that off, oil prices will skyrocket. All indications point to that. Iran's parliament has already voted to close the strait. The final call will be taken by the Supreme National Security Council. It may not hurt America directly, but it will give some leverage to Tehran. Now, we'll have to wait and see what the regime does. All of these options are fraught with risk, but 2 of them are nuclear options. The first is to attack America. There are some 50,000 US soldiers in West Asia. They are within Iran's striking range. Even Iran's proxies could target them with rockets. If that happens, all bets are off. The American reprisal could cripple the regime. The second nuclear option is exactly that, nuclear.
On Saturday night, but what they want to know is how much a weakened Iran can respond and what exactly the extent of this looks like. And that has been the concern that we've been hearing from the president's Republican allies who are skeptical.
And Caitlin, we just got word that 10 missiles were fired at Qatar, one at a facility in Iraq. That's the latest word that we have right now. But continue, please.
Well, and with those 10 missiles, I mean, that is something that the Joint Chiefs Chairman and the Defense Secretary are obviously going to be tracking to see what exactly the extent of that looks like. And if they believe it's kind of a measured response, obviously this happened when the president was in office the last time with the Soleimani strike.
Yeah. Caitlin, I got to jump in. I've got to go to Fred Plankton. He is on the phone from Tehran. Fred, what are you seeing there? There have been strikes in Tehran over the last 12 hours or so.
Yeah, there certainly are. There's a lot of strikes actually on the Iranian capital, Anderson. One very close to the place where we're staying. I would say about a block down, maybe about 500-600 yards from where we were. There was a massive Israeli airstrike and thick plumes of smoke all over the northern part of the city here. But if we're looking at right now, the Iranians certainly also very much saying that what they're calling this retaliation has started. I'm watching Iranian state TV right now, looking at Iranian state media, and they're calling this a robust and successful response to America's aggression. And right now, if we're looking at media, they're only mentioning the Al-Udeid air base in Qatar as a place that has been struck. However, they also say that there is going to be a statement from the military coming out very soon. So the Iranians are clearly also projecting this here at home on state TV, telling people that their response is now underway. But it does indeed come, you're absolutely right, after what were a lot of airstrikes today on the Iranian capital, also west of the Iranian capital, and where we really heard throughout the course of the day several times that airstrikes had happened, and some of them really rocking a lot of buildings in areas that we were in as well, Anderson.
Fred, just quickly, are they portraying this on Iranian state TV as a strike? This is the response, or this is the beginning of a response? Because we're now, we just got word there was 10 missiles fired toward Qatar, one in Iraq. Was there an indication that this is part of an ongoing series of strikes, or did they not specify?
Yeah, well, they're not specifying this at this point in time. They're saying that the response has been launched, but it's a really interesting question because we did hear from a senior Iranian official today saying that they wanted to make the United States pay, and that in total they're gearing up for a conflict both with the United States and Israel that could last up to 2 years, saying that they were prepared for something like that, saying that they believed that they had the public backing for something like that as well. So clearly the Iranians gearing up for what they could believe could be a longer conflict with the United States, and an ongoing conflict that could involve military action as well. Whether or not in response to the strikes on the nuclear facilities, this is a one-off or this is something where the Iranians might launch further strikes as well, at this point in time, they're not saying. But I think that they do believe that right now they are situated in a direct military confrontation, not just with Israel, but also with the United States, Anderson.
All right, Fred Plankton, appreciate that. Of course, it remains to be seen what Iran's military capabilities still are. Israel, several days ago, said that they had eliminated as many as half of the launchers for ballistic missiles that Iran had. Obviously, Iran has a number of shorter-range missiles as well. Remains to be seen what their capabilities really are. Retired U.S. Navy Commander Kirk Lippold joins us now. He was the commanding officer.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Christiana Manpour in London. Iran has fired 11 missiles in total towards American military bases in Qatar and Iraq. This after it vowed to punish the United States as well as keep up its retaliation against Israel, following this weekend's attacks on Iranian nuclear sites. This is where the US tested its biggest bomb ever, the 30,000-pound mop, several of them on Iran's underground nuclear enrichment facility, Fordow. US bombs and missiles also struck two other sites at Natanz and Isfahan. President Donald Trump is declaring it a huge win, saying he's, quote, obliterated those sites. But now his vice president is clarifying those comments, saying they have probably delayed but not destroyed Iran's capabilities. And furthermore, they are not certain about what's happened to Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. The fast move came as a shock to many, especially Iran, after the president opened a 2-week window to make his decision. Technically, he was within those 2 weeks, but much earlier than anybody thought. So is there any room left for a diplomatic way out of this? And what is the endgame? Let's get to all of this with the former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who's joining me now from West Newton, Massachusetts, for an exclusive interview. Secretary Kerry, welcome to the program. And of course, so important to have you. And you negotiated the only diplomatic arms control accord, if you like, with Iran over its nuclear deal. First, I need to ask you about this Iranian response. Clearly, a response was expected. What do you think from what you've heard? And we don't even know whether any have hit their targets yet.
Well, Christian, thank you. Look, I've just heard about this, just like you have. So I have absolutely zero briefing or knowledge of exactly what's unfolding. But clearly, Iran had to respond in some way, and they made it clear that they would, and I think the administration anticipated that. The real question now is, what's the impact? How big is this a serious effort to counter in a warlike way, or is it a message? Is it a sort of message sender? And then people will work in good faith to try to get to the diplomatic table. I mean, what's important to remember here is there's no military solution to this. This can go on and on. It could get uglier and uglier and more dangerous with greater and greater implications for a global basis. This is very dangerous. My hope is that this is more performative than consequential, and that it will satisfy their need to be able to respond. I think President Trump needs to clearly be very judicious about measuring that and understanding it, and hopefully take the higher ground of getting back to the table for the simple reason that we don't have any visibility anymore. Insight or the depth of insight that we had with the nuclear agreement that we put in place. I mean, with the nuclear agreement we put in place, we had huge insight as to what they were doing. We had stopped them from developing in whole sectors. We destroyed their plutonium reactor, which they were weeks away from being able to have bomb material. We were able to have, tens of thousands of centrifuges destroyed. We required them to destroy the core of what existed in Fordow, and they did. They dismantled under watchful eyes from the international community. Remember that we brought 5 nations and the United Nations to the table, and we put in place the strongest nuclear agreement that has been agreed to by any countries anywhere in the world since the 1950s or 60s. And so we just need to get to a negotiation in order to be able to really solve this problem.
Okay, so I want to ask you about that, but first I want to ask you one more question about this, because as you said, it was highly telegraphed. Iran has been saying since the U.S. Attack that it would have to respond. And some have called for a big response, some of the hardliners inside Iran. But what the U.S. obviously has experience with this. When Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force of the IRGC,